My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, and I wear the uniform of a United States Army general. In the field, among my soldiers, I am respected, sometimes even feared. But inside my own home, I have never been seen for who I truly am. I live with my parents, Robert and Linda, and my younger sister, Sophie. To them, I am not a leader, not a protector, not someone who has spent years serving this country. To them, I am simply a disappointment. Sophie is their pride. She is young, vibrant, adored by friends and relatives. Every word she speaks seems golden to them, while mine barely leave an impression. When Sophie enters a room, my parents smile with pride. When I do, they sigh as though I'm a burden. Sometimes, I wonder if they realize how sharp their words can cut. The quiet jokes about me being unmarried, the whispers about me wasting my life, the looks of pity at family gatherings, they have become the background noise of my life. I have faced combat zones, hostile fire, and decisions that could mean life or death for the men and women under my command. Yet somehow, none of those battles compare to the weight of sitting at my family's dinner table and hearing the unspoken judgment in their eyes. What they don't know, what they have never cared to ask, is that I carry medals for missions they will never hear about, scars from battles they will never imagine, and stories that would silence their cruel laughter. But I don't tell them. I let them think what they want. Because one day, the truth will come to light, not by my choice but by fate. And when that day comes, the world they've built on lies and favoritism will shatter. When I look back, I sometimes ask myself where it all began, this distance between me and my family. Perhaps it was the day I chose the army over the comfortable life they had planned for me. I remember the look on my mother's face when I first told her I was enlisting. Emily, this is not for women. You'll throw your life away. Sophie will go to college, get married, and give us a family we can be proud of. What will you give us? I didn't answer then because I knew nothing I said would matter. Over the years, while Sophie posted pictures of parties, proms, and vacations, I was halfway across the world. I missed birthdays, holidays, even my grandmother's funeral. I was standing under the scorching sun of a foreign desert, leading soldiers twice my size, making decisions that could either save their lives or cost them. There were nights when I didn't sleep at all, listening to the sound of distant fire, holding on to the weight of responsibility that only a commander knows. And yet, whenever I called home, my father's words cut sharper than bullets. Why don't you just quit? This isn't what women are supposed to do. Sophie is doing so much better. I wanted them to see me, not the uniform, not the medals, but me. But they never did. I came home once after a deployment, a chest full of ribbons, my name mentioned in Pentagon briefings. And at the family dinner table, all I heard was, Sophie got invited to another sorority gala. Isn't that wonderful? Every achievement of mine was invisible, erased by the glow they reserved for her. But that's fine. Because the thing about truth is, it doesn't stay buried forever. And when it surfaces, it changes everything. The night of Sophie's engagement was one of those evenings that looked perfect from the outside. The banquet hall glowed with chandeliers, tables lined with flowers and champagne glasses, and laughter echoed from every corner. Guests congratulated my parents, telling them how lucky they were to have a daughter like Sophie. I stood quietly by the side, watching her in the center of it all, her hair styled, her dress sparkling under the lights, her smile radiant as she accepted compliments one after another. To everyone there, she was the star of the night. When relatives came to greet me, it wasn't with admiration. It was with polite pity. Emily, you're still single, right? So, what do you do these days? They never waited for an answer. Their eyes had already dismissed me before I could speak. I could feel my parents' glances across the room, those quick, embarrassed looks whenever someone asked about me. They would change the subject back to Sophie, as though even mentioning me was a shame. And Sophie, of course, knew exactly how to play her role. She floated around the hall, her arm linked with her fiancé, Captain Daniel Harris. The perfect couple, the perfect family image. I kept to myself, sipping water, letting the chatter wash over me. I was used to being invisible at home, but here, in a hall full of people, it felt heavier. Every laugh, every whisper seemed sharper, as though they were all in on the same joke. I didn't know it yet, but this night would be the last time they would laugh at me. Because before the evening was over, the truth they had buried for years would come crashing into the open. I was standing near the refreshment table when it happened. Sophie, glowing in her engagement dress, gathered her friends around. Their laughter already carried the sharpness of whispers meant to be overheard. She glanced at me, then leaned toward her circle. "You know, my sister never really figured life out," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "She's 34, still unmarried, and doesn't even have a real job.
Can you imagine?
She spends her time pretending she's important, but in reality, she's just nothing." The girls laughed, covering their mouths with manicured hands. A few relatives chuckled awkwardly, trying not to look at me. My parents stayed silent, their faces frozen, but I knew that silence well. It wasn't protection, it was agreement. I felt every word like a knife, but I didn't flinch. Years of battlefield discipline had taught me how to stand still under fire. This was no different. Sophie wasn't finished. She raised her glass and said with a smirk, "Some of us are meant to shine, and some are just meant to watch. Guess which one my sister is." The laughter that followed filled the hall, bouncing off the walls until it wrapped around me like chains. I stood there, the loser sister, as they called me, mocked in front of everyone. I swallowed the bitterness, reminding myself, they don't know the truth.
Not yet.
But the truth has a way of showing up at the perfect moment. And it was about to arrive sooner than anyone expected. Just when Sophie's laughter peaked and the sting of her words hung in the air, an unexpected silence fell across the room. I saw movement from the head table. Daniel Harris, Sophie's fiancé, stood up slowly. His expression had changed, his eyes locked on me with a mix of surprise and respect. Then, in front of everyone, he straightened his posture and raised his hand in a sharp, flawless salute. "General Carter, ma'am." The entire hall froze. Glasses stopped midair, conversations died instantly, and for a moment the only sound was the faint clink of someone setting down a fork. All eyes turned from Sophie to me, the woman they had just mocked as useless. Daniel's voice carried through the hall, steady and commanding. "Do you people even realize who stands among you tonight? This woman is not a burden. She is not a failure. She is a general of the United States Army. She has led men and women into battle, stood in the line of fire, and earned the respect of every soldier under her command." Gasps rippled across the room. Relatives leaned forward, whispering in disbelief. Sophie's smile cracked, her face draining of color. My parents looked as if the ground had shifted beneath their feet. Daniel continued, his words cutting through the silence. "She has more honor in her uniform than most of us will ever have in our entire lives. And tonight, instead of celebrating her sacrifices, you laughed at her. Do you understand what she has given for this country while you mocked her in your comfort?" I stood motionless, my heart pounding, as the truth I had carried in silence for years was finally spoken out loud. For the first time, the room didn't see me as Sophie's forgotten sister. They saw me as who I truly was. Daniel lowered his salute, but didn't sit back down. His eyes swept across the hall, at Sophie, at my parents, at the relatives who had just laughed along. The weight of silence pressed on everyone. Then his voice rang out, clear and firm. "I came here tonight believing I was joining a family built on love and respect. But what I've seen is a family that humiliates its own daughter, a sister who mocks her sibling, and parents who let it happen." Sophie's lips trembled. "Daniel, what are you talking about? She's nothing." "Enough." His words cracked like thunder. He turned to her, his face etched with disappointment. "She is a general in the United States Army. She has more courage, honor, and sacrifice in her story than you could ever understand. And yet you called her useless. If this is how you treat a woman who has given everything for this nation, then I cannot marry into this family." Gasps swept across the room. Sophie stumbled forward, her hands shaking. "You can't mean that. You can't just leave." But Daniel removed the engagement ring from her hand and placed it back on the table with calm finality. I mean every word. I will not bind my life to a woman who disgraces her own sister, nor into a family that cannot recognize true worth when it stands right in front of them. He looked back at me briefly, his gaze filled with respect, then turned and walked out of the hall. His footsteps echoed like a verdict. The room erupted in whispers, some stunned, some judgmental. Sophie's mascara streaked down her cheeks as she fled the stage. My parents stood frozen, their faces pale, as relatives stared with disapproval. And I stood in the middle of it all, feeling lighter than I had in years. For once, I didn't need to defend myself. The truth had spoken for me. The night of Sophie's engagement ended in chaos. Guests whispered behind raised hands, relatives shook their heads, and the story of Daniel's walkout spread like wildfire through the family within days. By the end of the week, everyone in our community knew Sophie's engagement had collapsed because of her own arrogance, and my parents' reputation had crumbled alongside it. At home, the silence was heavier than ever. My mother avoided my eyes, my father spoke little, and Sophie locked herself in her room, refusing to come out. For once, their disappointment wasn't directed at me. It circled back on themselves. But it was too late. Months passed, and while I returned to my duties on base, Sophie spiraled further into recklessness. Her friends drifted away, her pride turned bitter, and eventually, she made a mistake that couldn't be hidden. She got involved in a financial scam, convincing people to invest in a scheme that collapsed within weeks. When the investigation began, Sophie's name was on the paperwork. One evening, I came home on leave to find my parents waiting at the door, their faces drawn and desperate. They hadn't called to ask how I was, hadn't welcomed me with warmth. They were there for one reason only. "Emily," my father said, his voice cracking, "please, you have to help your sister. You have influence, you have connections. If anyone can get her out of this mess, it's you." My mother clutched my hand, tears in her eyes. "She made mistakes, but she's still your sister. Don't let her life be ruined." For a moment, I looked at them. The same parents who had once watched as their younger daughter mocked me, who had stayed silent when I was humiliated in front of 100 people. And now they were begging me to save her. I looked at my parents, their faces pale and desperate, and for a long moment I said nothing. The same silence they had given me so many times, I let them feel it now. Finally, I spoke. My voice was steady, but each word cut deeper than a blade. "You celebrated my downfall. Don't expect me to celebrate your rescue. Family isn't about blood, it's about respect. And you gave me none." My mother's tears fell harder, my father's shoulders slumped. Sophie's name hung between us, but I felt no pull to reach for it. I turned and walked away, leaving their pleas behind. Outside, the air was crisp and cool, the sky painted with fading sunlight. I drove back to my base, where men and women in uniform stood tall when I arrived. As I stepped out, they saluted, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And in that moment, I understood the truth. My real family was not bound by blood. It was bound by loyalty, sacrifice, and respect. That was all I ever needed. This was my story, the night my family's insults turned into their own downfall. If you want to hear more stories like mine, make sure you subscribe to Revenge Repeat, because here, every betrayal finds its ending. Now I want to ask you, if you were in my place, would you forgive the family that humiliated you? Or would you walk away like I did? Tell me in the comments below. And remember, on Revenge Repeat, the story never truly ends, it repeats.